Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're looking at a really interesting story about how Kenyan graduates are using TikTok to not just, find jobs, but even launch entirely new careers.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So we're gonna dive deep into that. Now, what's really cool is our main source for this isn't like a business journal or something. It's actually an article from University World News.
Really?
Yeah, so it's not, just about dancing teens. This is about resourceful graduates and side hustles.
Mm.
And maybe we'll even get a glimpse into the future of work.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, the article starts out with this pretty stark statistic: 67% youth unemployment in Kenya,
Wow.
which is the highest it's ever been.
Mm.
So yeah, imagine graduating with all those hopes and ambitions,
Uh-huh.
only to be hit with that kind of job market.
Yeah, it must be incredibly discouraging for those graduates.
Right, and it makes you wonder what options are out there. Well, that's where TikTok comes in. I mean, TikTok's founder is now the richest person in China, according to Forbes.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so there's definitely money flowing through that platform.
Right.
Right.
And the article highlights how some graduates are finding ways to make serious income on TikTok. So it's not just, for fun anymore.
No, not at all. It's becoming a legitimate income source for some.
Yeah. So how are they actually making money?
Well, there's the usual suspects, advertising sponsorships.
Yeah.
But then there's this thing called live gifting that I found really interesting.
Live gifting. What is that?
So imagine you're watching a street performer. You're really enjoying their act, and you want to show your appreciation.
Huh.
You might toss a few coins in their hat, right?
Yeah.
Live gifting is kind of like that,
Yeah.
but with digital gifts. So viewers can directly support creators during live streams using these virtual gifts. It's almost like a modern-day patronage system.
That's actually really cool. It creates this direct connection between the creator and their audience.
Exactly.
But where does TikTok fit in with all the other platforms? Like, how much can creators actually earn there?
Well, YouTube is still the king when it comes to creator earnings. But a recent study by Epidemic Sound found that TikTok is catching up fast, and it's actually surpassing Snapchat. Huh. So TikTok is a serious contender.
Definitely. And this is particularly relevant in the context of Africa. There was this Geopol report, Social Media Usage Trends in Africa.
Oh, yeah, that was cited in an African Business article last October.
Right, exactly. And that report found that TikTok is already the second most popular social media platform in Africa, just behind Facebook.
Wow. So it's a global phenomenon, but it's really taking root in Africa as well.
Yeah. And the article highlights some amazing success stories of Kenyan graduates who are making it big on TikTok, like Flaqo Raz and Crazy Kennar. They're these comedy stars who've basically turned their degrees into TikTok fame.
I've heard of Crazy Kennar.
Yeah, he's hilarious. And what's interesting is that Flaqo has a degree in public health, and Crazy Kennar studied actuarial science.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their educational backgrounds are completely different from what they're doing now as comedians and influencers and content creators.
It's like you can have a degree in one thing, but then TikTok helps you discover your real passion. And Flacco even won the TikTok Entertainment Culture Creator of the Year award earlier this year.
Did he really?
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It really shows you the power of finding your audience and using your talents, whatever those talents may be.
Absolutely. And then there's Sada Mangi. She's a medical biochemistry graduate who turned to TikTok to sell beauty products.
Interesting.
She had a tough time finding a job after graduation, but instead of getting discouraged, she used her knowledge of biochemistry and her passion for beauty to create content on TikTok.
So it's like she combined her education with her entrepreneurial spirit.
Exactly. She's not just selling products, she's also educating and entertaining her audience. She even uses live streams to engage with customers and do product demos and receive those virtual gifts we were talking about earlier.
That's smart. She's creating this whole experience around her products.
Right. It's inspiring to see how she's turned her passion into a successful business.
Then we have Hezekiah Karanja, an accounting grad who accidentally became a videographer because of TikTok. Yeah. He started posting videos. His followers love them. And suddenly he's getting all these freelance gigs. Now he's actually going back to school to properly study videography.
So TikTok was like a springboard for him.
Yeah, it's wild. It makes you wonder if traditional education is becoming less relevant. Are we moving towards a world where skills you learn online are more valuable?
It's definitely a question worth considering, especially with the way technology is changing the job market.
And then we have Jermaine Odiambo. He's an environmental science graduate who created this successful sports channel called Wema Sports.
Wema Sports.
Yeah, he built this whole multi-platform brand. He interviews sports personalities, and he's just sharing his passion with this huge audience.
It's amazing how these platforms allow individuals to create their own media empires.
It really is. He's not just on TikTok either. He's on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, even X, formerly Twitter.
So he's really diversified his reach.
Exactly. He saw an opportunity and he took it. He's a true entrepreneur.
And it's not just him. All these success stories have this incredible hustle and entrepreneurial spirit behind them. These graduates aren't waiting for opportunities to fall into their laps. They're creating their own.
Yeah, it's inspiring. They're facing this tough job market, but they're not giving up. They're finding new ways to succeed.
And it's not just about the money either. It's about finding your passion and building something you're proud of.
Exactly. So we've seen how Kenyan graduates are using TikTok to generate income, build careers, and even challenge our notions of traditional education. But there's another layer to this story that I think is worth exploring. You mentioned this phenomenon of live gifting earlier.
Oh, yes. That's where things get really interesting. In Kenya, it's taking on a whole new dimension that we haven't even discussed yet.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Let's dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to unpack this whole live gifting thing that's apparently taking Kenya by storm. You were saying it goes beyond just like tipping for content, right?
Right. Imagine working into a marketplace. There are all these vendors selling their goods. But then you see someone just standing there, chatting with anyone who walks by. They're not selling anything tangible, but they're captivating people with their personality, their stories. That's kind of what live gifting is like on TikTok in Kenya, or Tap Tap, as it's also known.
So it's not so much about like polished videos. It's more about that real-time connection.
Exactly. It's all about going live, not necessarily with a performance or a product, but just to engage with whoever shows up. And if they're entertaining, funny, insightful Assasian, viewers can show their appreciation through these virtual gifts. It's like a digital street performance, where personality is the product.
That's really interesting. So it's like a much more direct way for viewers to support creators.
Yeah.
Without needing ads or sponsorships.
Yeah, and it's gaining traction globally. But it seems to have really taken off in Africa, which I think speaks to this desire for authentic connection and this willingness to support people directly.
That's a good point. But is it sustainable? I mean, the article talked about how much work goes into being successful on TikTok. Isn't relying on these virtual gifts kind of risky? Like, what if TikTok changes its rules or people just lose interest?
That's a valid concern. It definitely takes a lot of charisma and consistency to keep people engaged. And of course, there's always the risk that the platform itself could change. That's the nature of the digital world. But I think what's interesting is that this model is forcing us to rethink our ideas about work and income.
How so?
Well, it challenges this whole notion of a stable 9-to-5 job. With a regular paycheck, these TikTokers are essentially creating their own micro businesses, relying on their individual talents and the support of their audience. It's a much more fluid and dynamic way of making a living.
I see what you mean. It's like a new kind of gig economy, but built on personality and connection. But it does make you wonder, is this actually creating real economic stability for these graduates? Or is it just a temporary thing?
That's the million-dollar question. And I don't think we have a clear answer yet. It's still such a new phenomenon, and it's evolving so rapidly, but it definitely raises important questions about the future of work and the skills people will need to thrive in this increasingly digital world.
It's almost like these Kenyan graduates are running a social experiment on the future of work. They're stepping outside the traditional systems.
And forging their own paths.
Exactly. And whether they succeed or not, I think their experiences will provide valuable lessons for all of us.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've talked about the economic opportunities, but you mentioned earlier that there's a cultural dimension to this as well. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. The rise of TikTok in Kenya and in Africa more broadly is happening at the same time as this growing sense of cultural pride and identity among young people.
So it's not just about making money. It's also about expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And connecting with a wider community. Exactly. TikTok gives young Kenyans a platform to showcase their creativity, their humor, their unique perspectives to a global audience. And doing so, they're challenging stereotypes and redefining what it means to be African in the digital age.
So they're kind of taking control of the narrative.
Exactly. And this cultural exchange goes both ways. Kenyan TikTokers are influencing global trends while also being influenced by what they see from other parts of the world.
So it's like a global conversation happening on this platform.
Yeah, and it's not just about entertainment either. Think about the educational potential. Young people are learning about different cultures, languages, perspectives through this platform. It's a form of global education that's happening organically outside of traditional classrooms.
It's funny to think about. Imagine trying to explain to your grandparents that you make a living by getting virtual gifts from strangers on the internet.
Right.
They probably wouldn't understand it at all. But for this generation, It's becoming a legitimate pathway to, economic and creative fulfillment.
It really shows how quickly things are changing and how technology is reshaping our world.
It makes you wonder what other unexpected opportunities are out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. The digital landscape is constantly evolving, and new possibilities are emerging all the time.
So we've explored the economic opportunities, the
Mm.
entrepreneurial spirit, the societal shifts, and this cultural dimension of TikTok in Kenya.
Hmm.
But there's one final aspect of this story that I think we should talk about.
Yes. And it's a crucial one. While we focused on the positive aspects, we can't ignore the potential downsides and ethical considerations.
That's a great point. Let's dive into that in the final part of our deep dive. So we've talked about, all the positive stuff about TikTok in Kenya, but like with anything, there's got to be a flip side, right? What are some of the downsides, the things we should be cautious about?
Yeah, you're right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. One of the biggest concerns is the potential for exploitation, especially when you think about those virtual gifts that drive a lot of the income.
Hmm. Yeah. How so?
Well, there's this risk that creators, especially, younger ones, might feel pressured to do things that are risky or even harmful just to earn those gifts.
Oh, wow. That's a scary thought. It's almost like, how some traditional entertainers feel pressured to please the audience, even if it means compromising their own well-being?
Exactly. It's like a digital version of that. And then there's the whole issue of privacy. I mean,
Right.
we're talking about a platform where people are putting their lives out there, often in very personal ways. What happens long term? How do you protect your privacy when your livelihood depends on public attention?
Right. That's a tough one,
Yeah.
especially for young people who maybe don't fully understand, the potential consequences of sharing so much online. And then there's, you know, the darker side of social media, cyberbullying, harassment, the constant pressure to look perfect. Those are real risks.
Absolutely. And the way TikTok's algorithm works, rewarding viral content and quick hits of dopamine, it can sometimes create this race to the bottom
Yeah.
where creators feel like they have to constantly push the boundaries just to stand out.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like with any new technology, there's this period of adjustment where we're all figuring things out
Right.
individually and as a society.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking comes in. It's not about, demonizing TikTok. It's about using it with a discerning eye, asking questions, weighing the benefits against the risks, making informed choices.
So what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about using TikTok or any social media to build a career?
Well, first and foremost, be authentic. Don't try to be someone you're not. Focus on what you're passionate about, your unique skills. Let your personality shine through. Building a genuine connection with your audience is more important than chasing trends.
That's great advice. It's so easy to get caught up in comparing yourself to others and lose sight of what makes you special.
And secondly, be mindful. Think about the content you're putting out there, the message you're sending. Be aware of the potential impact on yourself and on others. And never compromise your values for the sake of likes or followers.
It's like use these platforms as tools. Don't let them use you.
Exactly. And finally, remember that the digital world is just one part of your life. Don't let it consume you. Cultivate your relationships offline. Pursue your passions outside of the screen. Maintain a healthy balance.
Yeah, that's so important. It's easy to get sucked into the social media vortex.
It really is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, how we use these technologies is up to us. We have the power to shape the digital landscape and make it a positive force.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I hope they see that this whole TikTok thing in Kenya, it's more than just a trend. It reflects these larger shifts happening globally. In the job market, in education, and culture, it's a story of resilience, creativity, and entrepreneurial spirit. But it also calls for critical thinking and mindful engagement.
Well said. It's a good reminder that the future is being written right now, and we all have a part in shaping it.
That's right.
Well, that concludes our deep dive into TikTok and its impact on Kenyan graduates. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. It was a fascinating discussion. Thanks for having me.